Please. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming here. I'll tell you about my first experience of publishing a newspaper in tense times. And this was not Haaretz. Before I became publisher of Haaretz, when my father passed away in 1990, I was the CEO of the company. And when I joined the Haaretz in the 1970s, I started some new publications, local weeklies, which turned out to be successful. And then in 1984, we started a new daily, which was called Chadashot News. It was unlike Haaretz, which was broadsheet, Chadashot was tabloid. The purpose was to compete in a younger and maybe less educated market. Unlike Haaretz, which was targeted to a certain population. Anyway, this new newspaper came out in March 4th, 1984. In April 12th, bus number 300 was hijacked by terrorists and stopped someplace in the south of Israel. And of course, the army encircled it. They attempted to negotiate. The passengers were hostage. They attempted to negotiate with the terrorists. And finally, they broke in. There were 4 terrorists. They killed them. In the process, one Israeli passenger soldier, I think Iri Portuguese, was killed as well. And the terror attack was over. The passengers were released. It so happened that our photographer, Alex Levak, came back to the newspaper with his film, and in a number of his pictures, you saw a terrorist being walked between 2 Secret Service people, taken away. The announcement of the Israeli IDF was that the 4 terrorists were killed in action. So this raised, of course, questions about how the terrorists found their death. And the newspaper every night sent the photo to the Israeli censorship, and every night it came back not allowed. In Israel, there is actually under still British law sort of administration of military censorship, and they announce all the issues that should be presented to them pre-publication, and the newspapers and other media should hand them over what they are going to publish on these issues so that they can decide if they allow it or not. In later years, this is a side remark, in later years, an appeal of one of our local weekly newspaper to the Supreme Court of Justice against the decision of the Israeli censor brought a decision of the Supreme Court of Justice that limited the scope of that the Israeli censorship can actually censor. It's now much less than it used to be, but at that time they were quite free. So after every night that this photo was banned, the chief editor asked me if I would go with him to the Minister of Defense to show him the photo. And I said, sure. And strangely enough, he accepted us. We asked for a meeting, he accepted us. Other than my name, Schocken, which was known because my father was an important editor and publisher of Haaretz in Israel, all the crew all the team of Hadashot were people who were not known to people in the establishment in any way. So the editor thought that if he adds a Schocken name to his request for this meeting, we have a better chance to get it. So we went to the Defense Ministry, met the Minister of Defense. At the time it was Moshe Arens, who is now a columnist for Haaretz. And that was 30 years ago. And we showed him the photo. Arens looked surprised, said, yes, I will look into this matter. And we left. On April 12th, that's slightly more than a month after this newspaper first appeared, Arens called the editors' committee to a meeting. At the time, there was this body that, in which all the editors of the media were a party, and this organ was used to meet with senior government officials so that they will be able to talk to them and to tell them things on condition of non-publication. This was actually established since the days of the early days of the state, and now it doesn't exist anymore. But and even during those years, at times, I think my father twice or thrice left the room when the minister or chief of staff or some other important person came and said, I want to talk about this issue. And so my father would say, no, I'm not, I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to be committed to any ban of publication. But anyway, at the time, there was this committee. The defense minister invited the editors of all the newspapers to this meeting, and but Hadashot was not invited because Hadashot was an upstart, and all the other newspapers sort of didn't want them to be part of the group. Who are you to start a newspaper anyway? Which I liked it because I knew that in order to be successful, you have first to be an outcast and not part of the thing. In any case, Arens told the editors, look, I've decided to appoint an investigation committee to find out the cause of death of the terrorists. And the head of this investigation committee will be a retired general that was Meir Zorea, whom everyone thought was a very good nomination. Part of the committee was a representative of the security service, Shabak, Yossi Ginosar, and I think there was another member. And he said, so this is what I'm doing, but I ask you not to publish it because Israel has captive people in Syria, and if the Syrians hear that there is a possibility that Israel killed captive Palestinians, this can endanger the life of our people there. And there was apparently an argument in the room, and the editors didn't agree. And in this room was also the chief censor, Yitzhak Shani, and he said to the editors, look, it doesn't matter what you say, you have to, before you publish, you have to send to me, and I will ban. And this is what happened. After this meeting, I think the spokesman of Arens called me and told me about the nomination of this Zorea committee, and they told me about the meeting with the editors and about this discussion between the editors, etc. And I told them, look, I don't see the logic of what you are doing, because if there is a risk, a possibility that the terrorists were killed after they were in captivity, it's better for the safety of our people in Syria that we say that we take the issue very seriously and nominate this committee, etc., etc. And the conversation ended in that way. There was no chief censor on the line, and that was it. In the evening, Hadashot team decided to publish the fact that Ahrens appointed this investigation committee, and the next day this was published in Hadashot. The next thing that happened is that Hadashot was ordered to be closed for 4 days by the chief censor. He had the authority in what to do. We appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed to allow us to publish and called for meeting the next day when the two sides will be represented, not just the censor coming in and issuing closure orders. So Hadashot came out the next day, and the next day there was the discussion in the Supreme Court of Justice, and they upheld the decision to close us, and we were closed for the remaining 3 days. What happened afterwards is that the fact that the military said that they were killed in action, and in fact it was not now an investigation of whether 2 of them were actually killed in captivity, started actually a deceit operation by the Israeli security service, because the people who killed these 2 were Shabak people, and they manipulated the investigation committee with their representative in it, reporting to headquarters and discussing how to manage the whole process and how to lie properly to the committee in order to get the blame away from them. Finally, they managed, to some extent, to put the blame on one of the army officers, I think Major General Yitzhak Mordechai, who really was in the area, in the action, but certainly did not participate in the killing. This created also unrest within the Shabak. People came, senior people came to the head of Shabak and said, look, something here went wrong, and you are backing it, and if the fact that the committee was manipulated was known within the Shabak, and they said to him, we will expose it unless you resign. And he refused to resign. They went, I think, to Shimon Peres, I think it was, who was prime minister. Peres just was not interested at all. Shabbat is what we need to protect, let's forget about the whole thing. They were not content. I think they went to the Attorney General. Wasn't so eager to deal with it. He already announced his wish to resign, and this big issue now, it's not what he liked. So they went to the general prosecutor in Israel, which you met, Joe, Dorit Benish. And she just saw that there was a big calm operation, that if Shabak has to continue to be an organization that the government can rely on, it has to be clean. And she pushed for action. But Peres didn't want any action. Shamir didn't want any action. Nobody in government wanted any action. And they invented the fantastic tool of giving amnesty before charges to the head of the Shabak, the people who were involved in killing the terrorists, the people who lied, perjury, to the investigation committee. Everyone got amnesty from Israel's president, who has the authority to give amnesty, Chaim Herzog, father of President Yitzhak Herzog. They got all amnesty even before being incriminated. So when Chadashot came out, about a week after it came out, a young soldier came to our office and said, "Look, this newspaper is the best thing that happened in my life. I want to help you. Give me every morning so many hundreds of copies. I will sell them in blocked traffic jams in the mornings around Tel Aviv." And we did this, and he was successfully sold the copies. After Chadashot exposed the fact that the Zorea committee was appointed and was closed, the drivers would say, "You are a newspaper that loves Arabs. We're not interested." We sold a few hundred copies less. In any case, after all the heavy criminals who got amnesty, charges were still pressed. Against whom? Against the editor, two deputies of Chadashot, and against the publisher. So the four of us stood in a criminal court for not obeying the censorship rules and not submitting this news story to the censorship. And finally, I was acquitted, and the three editors were charged and had to pay some penalty, not a lot of money. But it's a criminal, how do you say, incrimination? Conviction, right. So we appealed to the district court, and a wise judge said, after hearing the case from both sides, he said, the office of the censor did not take care that the issues that should be submitted to it will be published in the official publication of the government that make decisions bind, Rashumot. And since this was not published there, Chadashot was not bound actually to send anything. So he then acquitted the three editors. So finally this ended that way. What happened next is that Arens left the defense ministry, left politics, became a citizen, regular citizen, and joined some business group. And I met him again when we tried to form a group to bid on a tender for commercial television. And he was a representative of a big company, and I was a representative for Arets, and we talked about forming this partnership. And then I asked him about Autobus 300, and he told me, Amos, what happened is that the chief of Shabak, Avraham Shalom, went to me and said, Shamir think by that time Shamir maybe was prime minister, I think. Shamir authorized the killing of the terrorist. But I know that he went to Shamir, and he told Shamir, Amos authorized the killing of the terrorist. So I thought to myself, between the prime minister and the defense minister, the prime minister is stronger. So I appointed the investigation committee. And I said, but why did you close us? And I said, because Shamir got phone calls from the chief editor of Yediot Achronot, the competing newspaper, and the chief editor of Ma'ariv, another newspaper, and they said to him, look, you must do something with these bandits. We obey you, we play it according to the rules, and these gangsters do whatever they want. You must punish them. So he closed us. So for me, what I learned from this is A, if you love herbs, you sell less copies. And second, never trust the defense apparatus. Always be suspicious of what they say and what they do. I really encountered more difficulties in running a newspaper in tense security times when I was publisher in the second Intifada. And it was really very bad time in Israel. Bombs were in many places. The suicide terrorists really killed many people. You know, in Yom Kippur, Tel Aviv, you don't see a car moving. And during those days of the second Intifada, when the bombs were everywhere and terror attacks were everywhere, you could go out in Tel Aviv and see a very similar picture. People just didn't go out, and it was really, people were afraid. And suddenly I started getting letters about what Gideon Levy is writing. And Gideon Levy, I think for 30 odd years, maybe more, has a column on Friday, the Friday issue, writing about the lives of this Palestinian or that Palestinian or what happened to him in the place of friction between his life and the Israeli control over his life. And this couldn't get into a hospital, and this was blocked, and this couldn't harvest his produce, and people were killed, etc. Every week, a story about something that happened to real people, Palestinians. And we got no reaction to this. I didn't get until the second Intifada anyone saying, how can you do it, why do you do it, etc., etc. But the moment bombs started exploding in Israel and Jews were hurt, killed, etc., all of a sudden the tension was so much that people just apparently couldn't stand now what they easily could stand a month ago. They would write me letters. How can you describe suffering of Palestinians where Jews suffer so much, etc., etc. And during the years of the second Intifada, we had also cancellations of subscriptions because we continued to not only to report about what happened to us, to Israelis, to Jews, but also what happened during this time to the Palestinians. And so, you know, one guy who wrote me a letter, I think, he said, look, why do I have to read about this when I come home from the synagogue on a Saturday and I want to have some nice read, and I open your magazine, why do I have to read Gideon Levy? You don't report on any car accident that happens in a constant way. You just report about this, and it's not a nice reading for a Saturday afternoon. And after weighing it, I really decided that a newspaper cannot be called a newspaper if the role of a newspaper is to report about the reality of life as much as it can ascertain it. And that what happens to the Palestinians, who are our immediate neighbors, is a very major element of our reality. And if we stop reporting about their lives, we are actually short-selling our subscribers. Because although they don't like to read about it, our job is really to tell them what's going on. And this is a very major part of what's going on. So this decision that we're willing to take cancellations, but we are not going to change our policies, was always part of Haaretz way of being edited. My father, in the first Intifada, got a letter from a reader who said, "Look, I don't want to, on the first front page of the newspaper that I read in the morning, to see a picture of a Palestinian girl whose eye was destroyed by a rubber bullet of an Israeli soldier. I don't want to see this in the morning." My father answered him, "Well, if that's the case, you're not suitable to be a reader of Haaretz."
Fire.
There were other issues in this. For instance, we got some pressure from Jews, mainly at that time in France, and some of the friends of chief editor at the time, writing to him that French media was quoting Gideon Levy and Amira Haas, and was quoting stories, and that their non-Jewish friends would say, "Okay, look, if this is an Israeli journalist who is saying this, then something is wrong with what you are doing." And this was also another issue. What do you do with this? Where is your responsibility? And after debating this, I came to the conclusion that it's not our consideration. We are, I thought at the time, maybe it's changing now, we are an Israeli newspaper. We report to our Israeli readers the reality as we see it. And if other newspapers want to buy this piece or that piece and publish it, it's their decision. We will not try to edit the other publications abroad and say, "No, you took too many articles of Gideon Levy, so that's enough for you." So that kind of pressure has really made us take decisions that, in the last analysis, in all cases, really cost us friction with the readers. And the last and the most known recently case was Gideon Levy's article last year about the pilots who bombed Gaza, destroying neighborhoods, killing hundreds of civilians. And this really caused an uproar. Of course, competitor newspapers brought it to their front homepage on the different sites, we got at the time, I think, altogether about 600 cancellations, 800 for our full week, readers and 800 for our Friday readers. Even though the Friday readers did not get the article, but the article, because it was published, I think, on Tuesday, and they get only the Friday issue. But it got a lot of mileage on the web. People just transferred it, and you could read it in many places, and promoted it, how the terrible Gideon Levy and the terrible Haaretz are writing about our brave pilots. And yet when I think about the role of a newspaper in a situation like this, is first, yes, you're not going to censor an important journalist who brings his opinion or relevant news, even though if it costs you at a certain moment losses on circulations, and in some cases advertising as well. From a different perspective, we had similar situations with business reporting. And I will say that in Israel now, there is, I think that there is public pressure on the way you publish in a newspaper, etc. Just this morning, I opened Facebook and saw a very nasty comment about the Haaretz of the chief spokesman of the Justice Ministry. So, we get all these things about the way about the articles that we brought in our Friday issue, and but there is no pressure from the government or such to curtail press freedom. The pressure is done in other ways, like, for instance, now the Prime Minister is also Minister of Communication. He can make the rules on how the important managers and editors of the television companies will be nominated, etc. But the newspapers are now more, I think, adjust according to what they think the public wants. Of course, there is one newspaper that serves the Prime Minister only, but okay. But we had quite a tough time when our business section wrote on the need to reform certain industries, and mainly at the time it was the cellular industry. People used to pay a lot of money for cellular services. The companies were making like 50% profits, and our newspaper started pressure, writing constantly on the need to reform. And the next thing that happened, of course, is the cellular companies stopped advertising and this kind of stuff. So this is damage that I think is more likely to happen, and it is even more likely not to happen because the press is weaker, advertising is not growing, and it is allocated to many more media than it was in the past. So it's better not to get into trouble with that big advertiser. This is a kind of censorship, an economic issue that I see more dangerous in Israeli society in these days. And we really had a very tough time during this year's pressure on reform in the cellular industry, and also pressure on changing the laws so that there will be less possibility of concentration of economic power within very few business groups. And this was such a big fight that during this fight, the head of one of the big groups acquired a competitor newspaper, Ma'ariv, and the next thing that happened after he acquired this newspaper, he came with offers of 50% plus or 100% plus salaries to journalists of Haaretz. And so this was this was a really unpleasant period. But in a way, I would say that the pressure on a newspaper like Haaretz comes from many sources. Of course, when there is security tension, like for instance now, with the knife intifada, again, people were becoming much more sensitive, like they were with Gideon Levy during the second intifada. They become much more sensitive. And then I get remarks on Twitter. How come you said that these people were killed in terror attack, while in the next stage you say that these people were murdered in the terror attack? It is maybe because it is those who were killed are people from the occupied properties in one of the settlements, and the people who you wrote were killed are people who were in proper Israel. And so I conduct occasionally conversations on Twitter and Facebook with people and say, no, these two words, to be killed or to be murdered, are in Hebrew completely interchangeable. And it's true that the law defines these two words differently, and murdering is heavier as far as penalty is concerned, but in a speaking language you can use both languages. No, the sensitivity to every word is going through the roof now. And so this is also a kind of pressure. And finally I said, look, I don't want to participate in this linguistic terror that people are trying to enforce in order to make their point about how you report and how you do these things. Which in normal days, I don't get any such reactions almost. And since now there is also this new media, I'm really trying to engage with people who if I see them, and to try to give an explanation of how it's done, what are our considerations, etc., etc. But of course, during times like this, if you want to remain a newspaper that reports the news and not raise emotions, and which other media is doing all the time, but really to report the news and on reality in all its places and in all its appearances, then at times like this you certainly face pressures and you annoy readers and etc. Question?
About 10 minutes left.
Okay, yeah.
So, thank you very much for everything, for coming here, but being who you are and leading what you are leading. So I think it's a tremendous, so important for many people. So first of all, thank you. I know.
Many people at the house are.
Okay, so thank them for
the address.
thank them as well. But really, thank you. And I have many questions, but I'll ask two. First of all, now with Guy Rolnick being a very vocal person with Hon Shilton, forgive me, I don't know how to translate that. Do you get more?
That's how you can translate it.
Do you get more criticism and more pressure from other voices in the market?
I think not. I think not, because finally this issue we won. To put it bluntly, we won. Cellular reform took place. Prices to the public went really low. You pay now. You can have a monthly service for $10 in Israel, which is unlike the United States even. And there are some pressures to change it and go up with it, but it's 40 shekels or 50 shekels a month. That was 600 shekels before the reform. Big difference. the government passed a law requiring big conglomerates to separate real holdings from financial holdings. Because there was a situation that one conglomerate who had real holdings and needed credit would take it from the insurance company of the other conglomerate, and their insurance company would loan to the other guy who has also real companies. So this incestuous relationship, to some extent, is no longer possible because of the law against concentration of certain economic power in Israel. And this was also passed completely because pressure of Guy Olnik and his team. Now that they made this television program about Olnik, Zelicha, and Danny Gutwein, 3 chapters. They are just
became viral.
they are the big best viewed all the time. So I think in this respect, people understand that the work of our business section under Guy Olnik really saw things that other newspapers or other media tried not to deal with it, because it's going against the business community, your advertisers, and the people you hobnob with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The other question is, if when we look at the map of media in Israel, it narrows down one stage after the other. Do you see any future, in the near future, any chadashot, not from a political point of view, but being independent and really trying to be criticize? Do you see that happening?
There are some blogs like.
Yes, but that's private.
It's private blogs that people organize. I think some get money from foundations that support their commitment. But they are not as powerful in terms of exposure to the public. They exist. But the media is weak. The media is weak. I don't know how it is in this country, but the media is weak because advertising money is not growing, and it's tough. So it's not like the days where we had thousands of little advertising of people selling their cars or buying a second-hand car or renting an apartment or this, and this was money that was great for newspapers because there were no strings attached, and this was it. This is gone to the internet for free. So it's good for the consumer, but for the newspaper and the media, they are getting weaker. Yeah.
So you discussed before the kind of boundary of a newspaper that wants to publicize something that's important, as an important statement when you talked about the 300 bus, versus, my question is, where do you stand insofar as the importance of newspaper integrity versus censorship? I mean, should the newspaper always say everything? What do you feel about that?
My principle is very simple, and I didn't invent it. Where a news story passes 2 tests, it is true and it is of public interest, then it ceases to be the property of the newspaper or the publisher. It becomes the property of the public. And the role of the publisher is like a trustee for the public. And as trustee, his responsibility is to publish it and as soon as possible. So there is no room for, from debating with oneself, because if it passes these 2 tests, then you publish it and that's it. It really makes life easier.
Oh, thank you.
I want to second the previous comment.
I read this also. After I first wrote it in some article in Haaretz in 1994, I think, the biography of Catherine Graham was published in 1997. And there she describes the process of her father, Eugene Mayer, who was a successful businessman and bought the Washington Post, developing the publisher's philosophy. And I saw that he also had the same principle.
So,
And of course, my father, when he was editor and publisher of ours, wrote the same way. So, as I said, I didn't invent anything, but to express it in words, this is what it is.
but then the question, the interesting question to me at least, is what's public interest? Or is everything of public interest?
No, because I'll tell you. There was a story about a daughter out of marriage of a chief justice in Israel, and pardon?
Yeah, out of wedlock.
Yeah, and our weekly newspaper in Jerusalem wanted to publish it, and I got people approach me and say, look, this is not of public interest, etc., etc. And I agreed, this is not of public interest, the private life of a Supreme Court judge. So I called the editor and said, what is this story about? This daughter out of wedlock? And he said, no, but the reason I want to publish it is because this Supreme Court of Justice really ignores this daughter. He doesn't keep relations with her. I don't know if he finances her or not, but no fatherly contact. And on the other hand, he just issued a decision in which he expounded on the importance of relations between parents and kids. So this moves the issue from not of public interest to public interest. So, it's, we can also make mistakes.
And what was the result?
It was published. So maybe it was the right decision or wrong decision, I don't know, but you don't want to go into private lives of people who are in the public eye if it's really not of public interest. Unlike, for instance, the British press. There it's, okay, so these are different, different approaches to how you do it. But in Israel in general, all newspapers don't do it. As far as, private lives of people, they avoid it. Unless it's really something of, major interest, like, there was a lot of publicity to the wife of the Prime Minister, how the household is managed, etc., but it came from so many places and so recurrently that at some point, I think it was kept under the public eye for not a short time.
Final question.
Just one. So I wanted to second the comment about thanking you and your paper for all what you've done for many, many, many years. And we're obviously aware of the challenges that newspapers have given the internet and advertising and the whole economic dimension. But specifically, how does a newspaper like yours function when there's another newspaper which has got a different economic model and a different principle of publication and a different definition of public interest? How do you really survive?
Luckily, we are kind of in a monopolistic situation in the kind of newspaper that we publish. The other newspapers, the competitors, like Israel Today, Feldman, Edelson, is there to support the Prime Minister. This is wrong. Other newspapers do it in a different way or have other positions. But ours is, as a more or less a monopolistic place, if you want to have a more highbrow, serious newspaper, then it is ours. And of course, the political view of Haaretz, or I would say that the principles that guide Haaretz, I mentioned two of them when I spoke in the morning. the Zionist newspaper supporting efforts to reach peace with the Arabs, but there are others that relate to civil rights, human rights, and the Haaretz is, as a newspaper, we deal with issues that the other newspapers really don't deal. We deal with the issues of how Palestinian territory is being taken over by Jews in a deceitful way, and how all this process of financing it and acquiring it, and that suddenly overnight 25 Jews take over 25 apartments in an Arab neighborhood in East Jerusalem. We deal with these issues, and people who are interested in these issues read them only in Haaretz. And if you want to read a review of classical music concerts, it's only in Haaretz. And if you want to read about art exhibitions, it's only in Haaretz. And if you want to read a weekly supplement about book reviews, it's Haaretz. So we have an offering for our readership that in a way is unique in the market. Whether it's enough to survive, it's a question. Our
Or if
readers,
it's diminishing because...
it's on the one hand it's diminishing because our print subscribers are older people, but on the other hand our digital subscribers are young people. And we also introduced a couple of years ago, a few years ago, Friday issue subscription only for the printed product, and this was very successful because even younger people who are not reading a printed newspaper every day want to have a printed product at home with all the magazines and options, etc., etc. So far we are surviving, but we feel the pressure of the market when advertising is actually leaving the printed product to the Facebook and the Googles of the world, etc., etc. So it's a constant touch and go situation, I would say, to run a commercial newspaper profitably.
It's specifically related to Israel Today, that is mainly impacting the other newspapers more than ours.
But because of that, we managed to charge quite a high price for our subscription on the printed product. It's not so. If you look at our sources of income, it is now 60% readers and 40% advertising. It was the other way around maybe 7 or 8 years ago. The New York Times also, subscription readers' income is higher than advertising income. I remember the days when advertising income in the New York Times was 80% and readers' income was 20%. Now, if you can reach profitability in this form.
All right, I'm
Okay,
going
thank
to
you
cut
very
us off. Let's thank